go back and maybe call up John Beatty at the City of Morgan Hill. We had a group of people come to us in sort of the general plan update very early on. And they had 4 or 5 cities, and one of them had that kind of a program. I don't know what city it was, but John Beatty may remember.
Okay.
They came and made presentations to us on the GPAC. I can't remember which one it was.
And he works for the City of Morgan Hill?
Yeah, he's with the
okay,
city.
Good. All right. Thank you. Call the meeting to order, and if we could have a roll call.
Committee members Wolf,
Pre-
Hutchison, Edgerton, Glines,
Here.
Lovelace,
Here.
Oliver,
Here.
Brown, Hintermeister.
Okay, and Jan is away fighting the good battle up in Santa Clara today on park fees. And it's a hot issue up there. And so this is a short-term commitment, and he regretfully can't be here. Okay, report of the chair, just real short. I want to acknowledge Julie and the committee of on the Green Foothills, that they were among those who led the battle against the City of Morgan Hill's Southeast Quad Plan, and it was rejected by LAFCO. Supervisor Mike Wasserman, who is on the implementation and governing board of this agency, he and Kat Tucker of Gilroy voted for the project to accept the land, to allow the land to be annexed to the city. And interestingly enough, 2 weeks ago, Kat was replaced on LAFCO by the city's association, and a Sunnyvale person was appointed. I think it was Sunnyvale, may have been Mountain View, was appointed in her stead, and some believe it was retribution, especially since if you look at undeveloped land in Santa Clara County, it doesn't exist in Sunnyvale and Sunnyvale and Mountain View, but definitely down here. And that takes care of that. Dick, do you have anything you'd like to comment on ahead of time?
No, sir.
Julie? Kyle? Okay. And then if we could get a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the February 4 regular meeting.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
You don't have to abstain?
Okay, thank you. And so the motion, and any noes? No. So the motion passes unanimously. And we have Mr. Brown.
Yes.
And so then the next item on the agenda is to review the fiscal year 2016-17 draft budget. Ed, you're on.
Thank you, Walt. I have a short presentation to give you. Some of it, Walt and I think Jan were at the budget workshop. Old news for Walt, but it gets into a little more detail on the budget operating budget report that is on your that I handed out to you guys tonight. And what we would like is for you to sort of review this and get comments back to us by next Friday. And then I'll bring your comments forward to the implementation board.
Okay.
But I'll go over this tonight, and of course if you guys have questions or suggestions, open to that tonight also. All right, so today we're asking for you to review and comment, to begin sort of the comment period on our operating budget. And it's for the fiscal year 17. So what we're going to go over with tonight is the accomplishments in this current fiscal year, goals and objectives for the next fiscal year, and then get into some details with you about the operating budget for next fiscal year. So the key accomplishments, they're broken down into 6 categories. You got program management, land acquisition, management and monitoring, restoration, Western Burrowing Owl, and the regional general permit.
Ed, can I interrupt? Where
Yes.
are we on, is that in this handout?
It would be, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So with program management, so we've conducted, as you know, because you're part of the stakeholder meeting coordination that we do, we have a lot of governing and stakeholder meetings. We completed the conditions guide for covered activities. That's sort of the guidebook of how to implement the plan. Richard would be familiar with these as a local developer. And this is part of the application process and to help the local agencies with filling out the application and working with project proponents. We've done numerous interpretation and clarification memos, and that's essentially, we have this big, thick document that was written. Took 8 years to put the thing together, but then there was a mad rush to approve it. So there's some very vague language, some gray areas, and these clarification and interpretation memos are to try to make some sense out of that language. They also involve some minor amendments to the plan, so the plan modification approvals are minor modifications or minor amendments to the plan. A major amendment would reopen the plan, and as I often tell people, that's like a constitutional convention. Everybody would come out and want to change things that they don't like about it. That probably will happen at some point in the next couple years, because there are covered projects there are projects that are currently not covered by the plan, like the Water District Stream Maintenance Program. There's some linear transportation projects that are partially covered because they run through the plan area, and then they go outside the plan area. So there's talk of, to go along with that tax initiative for transportation that's going to be on the ballot in November, from what I understand, for funding infrastructure projects, that some of those projects would like coverage under the plan, and if so, it makes sense to sort of cover them throughout the plan area. But that also would involve a major amendment to the plan because you're reassessing the take. So that'd be a big process. So what we currently do is just try to make this big document make more sense, and it's so we're still working through that, and we have 4 or 5 more of these memos in the hopper. We've done 5 co-permittee and consultant trainings. These are to help people with understanding the plan, and we did a training for the RGP also. That's the regional general permit through the Corps. Projects that some projects still have a Section 7 nexus, and that's related mainly to fish. And so those projects that have Section 7 consultations and also to impacts to waters related to California Talladega salamander and the red-legged frog. So that's a process that is sort of embedded in the Section 404 Clean Water Act review process. So the RGP is now going to merge Section 7 and sort of Section 10, which we are of the ESA Act. So there's going to be an end to that duplication for projects covered by the RGP. But there's still a group of projects out there that still go through 2 processes, and this memo is meant to align the 2 processes. So if you're a project proponent and you're affecting fish, or you're a project proponent and you're outside the thresholds of the RGP, and you're affecting listed species, there'll still be that consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Service, but now we have a process where, in theory, it's supposed to link these two processes and provide a mitigation strategy, sort of a coordinated mitigation strategy. We're continuously revising the applications and reporting forms. We had a meeting today going over this very stuff, and we've improved our GIS data and our GeoBrowser, which is the online tool that people use to figure out what exactly are the impacts so it's an online GIS sort of tool that assists people with sort of scoping out their project and trying to get a rough idea of what their impact fees would be. I'm not going to go over this one, but you guys can look at it. It's sort of all the public outreach we've done. Also, a big part of what we do is finance. We're managing funds and fees that are submitted to us. So one of the big things we did last year was develop a financial accounting and tracking system, a software product called Black Mountain Software, which helps us with our budgeting and tracking of where the fees are and allows us to produce reports, not just on Excel, but through an online cloud-based data tracking system, financial tracking system. We've developed financial policies for the agency. We've gone through our second audit successfully, our second AB 1600 report, and that's a requirement of state law, where if you're collecting fees that are related to project impacts, that there is a nexus between those fees that you're charging and how those fees are spent. 3 California Fish and Wildlife local assistant grants were worth nearly $3 million, or $300,000 were awarded to our region as a result of the plan. We had projected that we'd get $3.1 million in grants, but the timing of the Section 6, which is the big land acquisition grant through the federal government, the timing of it changed. Normally the application period is October. They switched it to March this year. So given that change in time, hopefully we'll still get the grant. It won't be part of this budget cycle because of that. We also applied for a Prop 1 grant for a property for water conservation by protecting watersheds and protecting water supply, and we did not, unfortunately, we did not receive it. We found out that the state didn't award any acquisition. They didn't use any of the Prop 1 money for acquisitions, and at least the Prop 1 pot that we were applying for. So I'm sad that we didn't get it, but at the same time, nobody got it. So from what I understand, from what Dave Johnson and the state told me, it's a new program, and they were afraid to make a mistake because of that quantification issue of trying to show that you're actually protecting water supply and sort of showing that by protecting these upper watersheds of these, in this case it was Penitentiary Creek, and there were some groundwater resources that we were also going to protect. It's sort of showing that this money would in fact protect those resources, and would these resources not be protected in the absence of these funds going towards acquisition of these lands. So they were sort of some of the same issues they have with cap and trade and carbon sequestration. Sort of would the land have been, in the absence of it being acquired for watershed protection, would you lose that water supply, or would it somehow be impacted in a negative way, and how do you quantify that because we're talking about rural areas that, yes, there's the threat of development, but not on the scale that you see in the valley. So that's from what I understand what the main concern was, and there was a group of people that were, to be blunt, afraid to make a mistake.
Awarded.
Fish restoration was a big one, wetland restoration, and so it seemed to go towards restoration projects, and I don't know if that's in this pot of money, so there's a coastal conservancy pot that we think might be a better fit. And there was this CDFW Prop 1 monies that we were encouraged to apply for. And the way CDFW decided to use the money was primarily, from what I could tell, restoration projects. And a lot of it went to RCDs and NGOs. So it didn't seem to go to local government organizations like ours or to city government. I didn't see that. I'm trying to remember all the grants that were awarded, and a lot of them had to do with salmonids. The director of CDFW is the former director of California Trout, I think, and so it could have been a priority of his. I just guessing, but that's how it unfolded. We had we're projecting 3.7 million, actually it'd be a little bit more than that, in revenues from covered projects. And we originally, this time last year, we were saying we were going to project revenues of 12 million. And it's mainly been a timing issue of when it's been primarily private development projects in the city of San Jose and in the city of Morgan Hill, when they're going to be pulling their grading permit. So these projects, from what we've been told, are still happening, but they're pulling their grading permits next fiscal year. The two in San Jose are pulling their grading permits this summer, from what I've been told. And so it's not that these revenues have gone away, it's just the timing of when we receive them. And it also applies to some water district projects and some county bridge projects. So for us, trying to predict revenues has been challenging because of the way private development moves forward, when they're ready to pull their grading permit, and that's what triggers paying the fees. And Dick can answer this better than I could, but it's what are market conditions, what are financing, what is, if you're a company like KB Homes, when your directors give you the go-ahead to move forward on the project. So trying to understand how the private development system works and when they're going to trigger that discretionary action of a building or grading permit is difficult. So some of these projects, the cities do the best they can to tell us when they think they're going to happen, but it's driven by a lot of different factors that are, beyond our ability to project. The good news is, going through this twice now, we're going to have more conservative estimates on what we think our revenues will be.
I think part of the answer might be that we had rain for the first time in a number of years in November, December, then January, not February, March, but that put off an awful lot of grading projects during that period of time. The other question I had on that item, though, the burrowing owl fee that was estimated at 4.4, and we got 37,000. That's such a drastic difference.
Yes.
Help us out to understand that one.
Yeah, that's related to one project in San Jose, the Meadow Fair project, which, from what I understand, will be pulling their grading permit this summer. I've been told that. And they, most of that money was coming from that one project. Yes, yeah. And it's not we got a project from the city of San Jose called the iStar project, paid for some of their infrastructure that they're putting in now, and that's not reflective in these numbers because we don't have a breakdown, but I believe there's a couple $100,000 associated with burrowing owl with that one. but we don't have a breakdown from the city. But yeah, huge difference. But it's that one project was the majority of that. Yeah. So going forward, and a lot of the, as I go through this, you'll see a lot of the revenues that we're projecting for next year are carryover from this year, because the projects, it's not like in '08 where people just said, wow, the economy is going and I'm just going to stop. These projects are moving forward, and given that, but beyond that, we're going to be looking at projecting $3 to $5 million in revenues, independent of grants, moving forward. Because I think there's going to be a slowdown in development for a lot of reasons. Here's a little unique because we have such a acute shortage of housing. I don't know how that translate into projects on the ground, but given a lot of the signals you see from the global and national economy leads you to believe that things will start to slow down in probably 2017, certainly 2018. So given that, where we're going to start, and given this difficulty and sort of the crystal ball of when these projects are going to come in, I'm thinking, long-term horizons that our revenues from fees will probably be in the $3 to $5 million range for the next 4 fiscal years, or next 3 to 4 fiscal years after this upcoming fiscal year. So we still have there's this old adage of the pig through the snake, and these projects have been on our books, or at least in our radar, the ones that we're projecting coming forward next fiscal year for a couple years now. They've been in the planning stages. The one advantage we have is that we also have public projects. So there's the 101 expansion, there's a lot of these county bridge projects, there's a lot of water district projects, so we always will have some sort of funding coming in because of the combination of both public and private. But I don't think you're going to see these, we had nearly $8 million in revenues last fiscal year. We're projecting 12, just under 12 this coming fiscal year. So I don't think you're going to see those kind of numbers coming with the fiscal year 17, 18. So it's really beholden upon us to partner with people to acquire land. And in the EO report, I'll go over some of the organizations we may be partnering with. We also negotiated 3 mitigation-only agreements with Caltrans and PG&E. So these are projects where they already had BOs. 2 of them are in the Highway 152 area, and they just preferred to mitigate through us versus going to a mitigation bank or trying to do a project themselves, sort of like a project proponent mitigation only project that they would develop themselves. So we have now these projects, this money can be used to help us acquire land. It can be used to help fund our endowment, manage these lands. In some cases, the Heckard Pass project, we will buy land for Caltrans, and that land will be set aside for Caltrans project forever. It won't count as credit towards our conservation goals, but it does help us in generating revenue to buy a property. So if we buy a 1,000-acre property, this project I think was 34 acres. 34 acres of that will be set aside for Caltrans, and we'll manage it for them in perpetuity. The Moss Landing was temporary impacts to serpentine, and that money will be used to manage the serpentine habitat. We've also developed a lot of policies and procedures. This past year, we developed personnel policies for the agency. There were none, and as we've added staff, it became apparent that we needed to start coming up with an employee handbook. We developed 2 position descriptions, and we're working on a 3rd one for a land management point person. Created 3 on-call consultant lists for restoration, species monitoring, surveys, and property appraisals. So these on-call lists are, you have RFQs, requests for qualifications, and a bunch of consulting firms submit their proposals to you, appraisers in the case of property appraisers. And then you review them just like you would an RFP process. And the ones that pass the muster end up on a list that's good for 5 years, and you can pick from the list of firms to do projects for you. So it sort of streamlines the RFP process. In some cases, we would still require an informal RFP, let's say on a complicated project that we wanted to get some bids from more than one firm. But it just helps us with, in the case of property appraisals, instead of going on an RFP every time, we just look at the list and pick one of the firms to do an appraisal for us. We did an RFP for professional services. The original contract, which was primarily with ICF International, was done with the county back in 2006, I believe. So we did a RFP for professional services to make it a contract with this agency, and we had gone through 12 amendments with the ICF contract. So out of that process, both DUDEC and ICF got, only 3 firms bid on it, and 2 of them were awarded portions of the work to help us out with various aspects of plan implementation. We streamlined the PSE approval process, where things now can be approved by the executive officer that aren't triggering an EIR. Instead of going to the board. So a lot of the PSE stuff we got is very small impacts, or it's a restoration project by OSA. So those that do not require an EIR are now can be approved by the EO. So we streamlined the land transaction process, and we developed a public land in lieu of fees policy. We had a private one, but so that's where you can offer up property in lieu of fees for your mitigation requirements. So staffing, we have 2 full-time staff. The principal program manager is a new position, and Tara Donovan is here tonight, and Tara's our latest employee. So when she gives you a presentation on the annual report, she can give you a little background on who she is and why she was crazy enough to come work for us. And we also, Jill Moros is our management budget analyst. So we also have accounting and financial and legal services. I mentioned ICF, DUDEC, contact with county parks for grant services. We have a contract with county planning for GIS support. And then we have various other consultants working with us. So part of the reason why I'm trying to add staff is, as good as our consultants are, they're expensive. And in some cases, it's more cost effective for us to have staff than consultants. So it's finding that sweet spot of having the right number of staff balanced with consultants. And the advantage of consultants is obviously if it's 2007, 8 all over again, you don't have to go through layoffs. But in some cases, they're 50% to 100% more than, depending on what the task is and who you have working on it, than having in-house staff. And consultants, in some cases, we're always going to have the biomonitoring being done by consultants, and these one-time projects where we need someone to come in and work on a specific 6-month kind of project, I imagine we'll still be having consultants support us on that. So land acquisitions, really the only one is the Coyote Ridge, which was enrolled in the reserve system, and you guys are all aware of that. The enrollment target for fiscal year 15 was 5,200 acres. The reason we thought it was going to be 5,200 acres was we thought Calero Park would have been enrolled in the reserve system by now. And we also thought one of the properties listed after Calero, Richmond or one of those, at least part of one of those would have been purchased by now. So that funding conundrum for us contributed to not purchasing a piece of Richmond Ranch right now. There were some negotiation hiccups with Lamont that we're working through. UTC, that's the rest of that property, and Sargent Ranch are complicated. But with Calero being enrolled and hopefully Richmond Ranch and Lamont being acquired next fiscal year, that 5,200 number will be a real number. The Caltrans land donation, it's on Pacheco Creek. It's their mitigation site off of 152. That's going to the California Transportation Commission this month, and they will be donated, so they have to approve the donation to us, but that's supposed to take place this month. And that's only a 55-acre site, but it's very important for connectivity across Highway 152. There's the creek runs under 152 there, and there's an overpass, so it's a great site to allow for wildlife migration along that highway. Going east from Gilroy. Yeah. Correct. Yep.
Ed, could you remind me, so this is a land in lieu?
No, they just donate. Yeah.
Mitigation?
Yeah, it's
Or straight up donation?
straight up donation. And part of it is still,
Out of it?
they don't have to manage it anymore.
Okay. All right, so then,
Yeah.
if it's a straight up donation, then there is no endowment or any other funds that come with it?
Some
for us
of
to manage
the,
it?
they are providing some funding for an endowment, yeah.
Okay.
It's through one of their mitigation-only projects that are coming in. They're going through the Habitat Agency, and they're giving us a lot of latitude on how we use that money, and a lot of that's going to go towards the endowment for this site.
Okay.
And there's still credit available for the Habitat Agency out there. So even though the property was bought for Caltrans, not all of it was used to mitigate some of their work, I assume, along 152. So I mentioned the Section 6 grant. We submitted one in March. We've had conversations with the Wildlife Conservation Board, the Bureau of Reclamation, the Water District, and others about their funding. Also the Resources Legacy Fund, about be sort of like a revolving loan fund that they would loan us money to provide gap financing for acquisitions, and then we'd have to pay that back, of course. But at least if we need money now, that could be a source of funding for us. Management and monitoring, it's most of our effort right now is on Coyote Ridge, and it's been focused on the amphibians and the plants. We've also done an amphibian surveys at at Sierra Vista, and we did some bay checker spot butterfly surveys at other properties outside of the Coyote Ridge Open Space Reserve. Western burrowing owl. So there's the complicated strategy to implement to try to save this bird from going locally extinct. So there's a lot of surveys, there's a resource group. So this is that's why we collect those monies. And we're going to be talking to Mountain View about working collaboratively with them at Shoreline. We're going to be talking to the airport soon about Guadalupe Gardens. We're close to getting a management agreement with the regional wastewater facility to assist with managing their lands for burrowing owl, because the funding for that is running out. We have an agreement with Don Edwards Wildlife Reserve. We're working with Steel Wave on a voluntary land management collaboration. They're in the El Viso area of San Jose, and they have their project was built on a landfill, but part of it is set aside for burrowing owls. And we worked with them to change the mowing regime, and we're going to do a small restoration out there to construct some burrows, and hopefully the owls will use those burrows at least for wintering habitat, and in the ideal situation they would use it for breeding. It's very close to, it's not far from Don Edwards, it's not far from the Regional Wastewater Authority, it's not far from shoreline, so given where it's located, in the way birds move around the region, there is a possibility that they could use that site. So we're doing a restoration project at Clara, and I have some exciting news to tell you. We had our pre-construction surveys done out there, and we found CTS in both the wetland and the pond. No one thought they were there. And we also found a pond turtle at the pond. So that was pretty exciting. We also found other amphibians, not covered by our plan, but still California newt, the tree frogs, and western toad. The tree frogs and the western toad were found at the wetland, and the newt was seen at both sites. So we're at 65% design. It's completed in March. We're now just, given this new information, we want to tweak the project to take into consideration protection of CTS and the turtle as we deepen the pond to try to improve habitat for the frog and to try to improve sort of the complexity of the habitat for the turtle and create more habitat for the salamander. We're also working with the San Jose Water Company. They're a partial funder of this to ensure 401 certification of their project through the regional board.
Is that the like 1 million plus tank they're trying to put in?
Yes, yeah. The county parks, as you know, tried hard to get them to locate it somewhere else, and they paid a lot in habitat fees, if that makes it sound any better.
Yay!
I know, it would have been best. County offered them a comparable site, same elevation, but they wanted to build it there. They've been very good to work with, at least on this stuff, and we're starting to develop a good relationship with the regional board, because it's very important to get a 401 certification of our regional general permit. So we do have water permitting integrated with the ESA, CESA permitting that we currently have, because a lot of projects are, the water board and the Corps wouldn't call it this, but project proponents feel they're being paying double mitigation, one set of fees to us and another set of fees for water impacts. So the great thing about the regional general permit now is that our fees are recognized by the Corps as adequate mitigation for 404 impacts. The regional board, I don't think, will ever quite get 100% integration, but I'm cautiously optimistic that we can get integration for most projects that are covered by the RGP. You all know a lot of what we went through to get the RGP, so I won't go over that again. It was issued in January of 2016, and we're in the process of developing applications, and we have a couple projects in the city of San Jose that want to use the RGP, and there's some county bridge projects that want to use it. So it's starting to happen.
And the water board, that's the San Francisco one, not San Luis Obispo?
Both, yeah, both. And we've had 2 meetings with them, but the 2 boards together. One was a conference call, well, it was in person, I had a call in, and the other was in person in Oakland. And they're willing to work with us. It's unfortunate that things didn't work out the way they should have worked out. There was the core regulatory staff at the time, they've since moved on. They weren't very helpful in getting everyone at the table through this RGP process. And that has changed, and I think there was a lot of mistakes made by a misunderstanding by everybody, both on the part of the agency and the co-permittees and the part of the regional board. And I'm hoping that we're building some new relationships with them, that we can get the 401 certification and move forward in a cooperative, collaborative way. I know that the goal of the co-permittees here was to get the ESA stuff done, the HCP, NCCP. But other plans in other parts of the state are doing the integration more up front, and it's very challenging. I think the advantage of this process is that it got the agency, it got the co-permittees, the ESA clearance, but both the RGP and the the RGP, now we have the 404 integration, so the next important one is the 401. And these plans in South Sacramento and Placer County and some other places, they're trying to do the integration now, but they don't have completed plans, and they're still working through that. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because you really have 2 very different models on how you would do one of these plans. West Riverside was ESA focused. This one was, Contra Costa was, and but these other sort of natural resource permitting processes were not integrated with the ESA. So we're trying to backfill it, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do it. So we have an interim mitigation process now. We still have to go through the interagency review team to get them to approve our in lieu fee program, where then we truly will have 404 integration with the ESA stuff. That'll take a couple years to get that approval from the IRTs, as it's called, and who sits on the IRT is the regional board, the wildlife agencies, the Corps, and some others. And so I believe we'll get that, and then we'll have a fully integrated process. So the good news is the Corps is recognizing our fees as appropriate mitigation for impacts to waters, but it's still very much like a core process. The forms that applicants have to fill out, it's not one form, they got to fill out 2. And there's still going to be some extra monitoring requirements associated by the Corps, but at least people will not have to pay fees to mitigate for waters and fees to mitigate for species any longer. There will be some additional fees that we charge for that extra burden of doing additional monitoring at some of these sites, but it's not going to be substantial. I sort of covered a lot of this already. So goals and objectives for next fiscal year, and I sort of list the properties that were discussed in the previous section. And Clara, we had a really good meeting with the county on the conservation easement. So all properties we enroll in our reserve system, we have to have a conservation easement over them, even if they're protected, like Clara. And the Clara site is being enrolled because it's offsetting land cover fees for county projects. It's also helping us with our NCCP requirements, which is conservation only. So it's more focused on ecosystems and habitat communities and all species. So the state program is not just about the covered species, it's about protecting large areas. And they're helping us by enrolling that property. They're helping us with our mitigation needs, and they're helping us with our conservation goals. And then the other properties what we will be, and I mentioned the regional wastewater plant will be enrolling some of their land into the reserve system, and then we'll be managing the rest of it. The Creighton University property is part of the Lamont Holdings, formerly Lamont Holdings. He donated that property to Creighton where he went to medical school. So I mentioned the San Jose, doing the Burling Owl agreement and the other ones, and we'll be doing construction at Clara this fall, and we'll be doing wetland and stream restoration design work on 2 other sites at Grant Park this year, next fiscal year also. We'll submit another Section 6 grant. We're working with PG&E because they're doing an advanced mitigation. They're doing an Bay Area HCP, and they want to do advanced mitigation for their HCP for red-legged frog, pay checker spot, butterfly, and the salamander. And they're willing to help us acquire a property. So it would be similar to that Caltrans example I gave you, a little bit different. So these properties are very expensive, and the only way we're going to be able to acquire them is through grants and partnerships with other organizations. And PG&E, we're developing a good working relationship with them and collaboration in acquiring land. So Richmond Ranch, we're looking at acquiring about a little slightly less than 2,100 acres out there. And in Lamont is, and the Creighton piece together is around 600 acres. So, and the property in the Lamont, it's up in the Milpitas area, is very expensive. And the property down here, we're doing an appraisal on it now, and we'll find out. It won't be cheap, but it should be cheaper than the ones up in the northeast part of the plant area. So we don't have enough money to acquire these properties just by our lonesome, even if fees were more robust. One of the things that's that we're finding is a lot of projects are exempt from the plan fees. One of the agreements with San Jose to get them to sign on was projects with existing development agreements don't have to pay fees. So all those projects in the North San Jose area that have existing development agreements, even though they're coming online today, don't have to pay habitat fees. They were exempt. And then there were a lot of pipeline projects too. And I think those, I mean, it was great for project proponents not to pay the fees, but I view this window of development that's happening right now in our region, it is a window. I don't think there will be this sustained level of growth that we're seeing now, given what I discussed earlier about the global and national economies. So the only way we're going to be able to, so we weren't able to capture those fees, and one can argue there's pluses and minuses to that.
Edmund, could you just clarify that for me?
Yes.
You said they had development agreements, so they were in the pipeline.
Two provisions. So there were projects, if they pulled their grading or building permits prior to August 1st, 2014, didn't have to pay habitat fees. And then projects like, I think it was BSE, it's now Apple in North San Jose along First Street, the First Street corridor. They had development agreements that predated the plan being approved, and they don't have to pay habitat fees.
So they pulled the bill,
Yes, correct.
that's not been the case in Morgan Hill.
I had a conversation with Morgan Hill Planning for a project out at, out by Target, I guess, and I told them, no, they don't have to pay habitat fees. They, some members of the planning staff weren't aware of that. So if there's something you know that I don't know, let me know, and I'll tell them, because those are the rules.
But I know it for a fact that we have paid HCP fees, but we had a development agreement
That predated the plan.
plan, and but
Okay.
we didn't pull the grading permit until later.
Let's talk,
Okay.
because you shouldn't have had to pay fees.
Okay.
Yep. It's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? Yep. So, yeah, well, I'm glad I brought this up.
Well, I just didn't want other people to escape it. I didn't mind paying it. I'm
No.
happy to pay it, but if other people are not.
No, and the provision was if the development agreement didn't substantially change. So if it's the same, basically the same development agreement. So in the case of this one with Apple, the only change was height, the height requirements, but the square footage was staying the same. The city of San Jose understands if the square footage changes or they're going to do more than the original one with BSE, then they'll have to pay the fees. So as long as yours is basically the same as what you negotiated with the city years ago, then no, you shouldn't have to pay fees. And I'm sorry that happened. Yeah. So these partnerships are critical to being able to acquire land. Without them, so that's why we're trying to build this relationship with PG&E, where they want to do advanced mitigation for their HCP that they hope will be approved next year. And the land bought with their money will be set aside for their HCP. They'll pay an endowment. That's one thing we told them, that they have to pay in the endowment. And then the land will be managed by us until we deed the property over to OSA or county parks or whoever. But it'll always be kind of a split acquisition, and the tracking of credits will be accordingly. So I mentioned working with the Resource Legacy Fund, which is includes the Moore and Packard Foundation. I'm going to be doing more outreach to foundations in this coming fiscal year. We will do more lag grants. The 401 certification, we'll continue to work on that, as well as the stuff I talked to you about with the RGP. We're working on developing an online interactive species monitoring database, so when a consultant's out in the field, everyone will do it the same way. It'll be fully integrated, and it'll be all incorporated into one database, and there'll be one protocol. We're working on a land management agreement for Coyote Ridge with OSA, and that should be executed next year, early next year. Surveys, we're going to start trying to do a 5-year budget projection for revenues and expenses. The endowment thing's been challenging, and only because we thought it made a lot of sense to go with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. And they've been great to work with, but they're finding it difficult to figure out how, because they're not used to dealing with somebody like us. But we wanted to invest our endowment with them because they invest in locally, and versus going with an organization that's based in Virginia, NIFWIF. So if we had never thought about going with the Community Foundation, we would have had the endowment invested now. But I'm hoping we can go with them. There seems to be some challenges to going with them. But we are going to have a report to the governing board in June, asking them to, hopefully it will be with Silicon Valley, but if not, to give us the, to grant us the permission to invest the endowment with NIFWIF. So we're also looking at, it's something that I've thought about, is increasing PSE application fees. They're very low. And PSEs, if you remember, are not signatories to the plan. They're,
Getting special.
yeah, participating special entities.
So back to working with Silicon Valley Community Foundation, or trying to.
Yeah.
So you said basically, you know, if we weren't trying to work through them right now, we'd have the endowment
Invested.
settled, invested, yes.
Yep.
So that means essentially we're losing money right now by not
We're
having
earning
it.
whatever the county earns, which isn't a lot, in their fund, you know.
So your deadline, from what I'm understanding, is it's sort of a make or break by June, and then.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, yeah, because
Yeah.
you're sort of losing.
Yeah,
Time.
I was thinking about it. I went out to get something to eat before here, and I was thinking about this, and I was just getting frustrated because I said, oh yeah, this is for the reason you just brought up. And you know, when you involve lawyers and things that an organization is not used to doing, and there's some complications. They're doing this in San Diego. I put them in touch with the foundation in San Diego. They were comfortable with it, and then, so one of the challenges was for them was just doing it. They didn't think legally they could. Now they think they legally can, but one of the stumbling points have been, well, we would prefer to invest in an endowment that would allow us to take the money out if we don't like what's going on. And most of the funds that are invested in their funds, so most of the money's invested in their portfolio, you can't take the money out. It's locked in forever. And they weren't sure they could give us, they do allow that for some portfolios, but they weren't sure they could allow it for us, that we would be able to withdraw the money if for whatever reason. So we would be ceding control to them forever, the money, but we'd get a payout every year. And they do claim they get a better return on investment, and that their fees are lower. So Urban Economics has helped Bob Spencer, who's involved with developing the financial plan. He's helping us with sort of weeding through that, and he's looking into that. If it do, in fact, they do get a better return, and are there any strings attached to it, or there's some sort of hidden fee? So he's getting into the weeds on that. And so that's it's been a struggle.
Yeah, well, obviously, time is winding down, because if you're talking about June
Yeah.
or in May.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to talk to Jill tomorrow about, okay, let's get Bob on the phone and see if he's got any more answers. But if not, then we're just going to go with NIFWIF and just be done with it.
Yeah, and I think that's very important, because we are, in fact, I know Gavilan, I mean, it's like .002 return
Yeah.
from the county.
Yeah.
And, you know, if they can't work with us on, because we have to be able to withdraw,
Yes.
then, you know, you just walk away and nice
Yep.
try.
Yep. Unless there's some real benefit by higher returns, lower fees, and somehow over time. But yeah, I know for Yolo County, that's their plan's going to be completed soon, but that's a big stumbling block working with the Yolo, I don't know if it's Davis or Yolo Community Foundation, and that's their big stumbling block of how we, you know, this issue of being able to withdraw the money.
We, if I may.
Yes.
the organization I work with has probably 12 funds at a community foundation, and most of them are invested in the long-term endowment where it is kind of giving them the money, but you get the return. But there are flex funds that are invested at a little lower rate, but they're still better than you can get elsewhere, and you can withdraw the funds. Is that what you're looking at?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Yes, the flex funds.
Okay.
And they're not sure they can do it for us. And I don't see, we get these cryptic answers. We had a very impressive initial meeting with them, and then the point person we've been dealing with is, doesn't always have the answers, and she goes, talks to the attorneys, and but I think we need to sit down with them and have another meeting and solve this and get it done. Yeah. But yeah, it's the flex fund. So are you comfortable with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a big proponent of the community foundation way of having funds in the community be invested in it. And you can do, you can have different funds, but if you want all of it available for withdrawal at some point, then probably the flex fund is the best way.
Because one of the things that NIFWIF was willing to, and that stands for I always get it, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and it was created by Congress. And they invest their money in something called the Common Fund, and it's out of Virginia. And but one thing they would do, let's say we had a disaster on one of our properties, fire and a flood, and it wiped out a bridge, and we had they would be willing to give you money from the endowment that you could pay back to kind of for emergency situations. Community foundation was not super comfortable with that when it came to the long-term funds versus the flex funds. I'm hoping we can work through this with them.
Because I'm new to this body, but it seems like if you're getting some of this money is coming as endowments for land acquisition that you're getting, it seems like you would probably want to have two types of investment. One is the endowed fund with those monies, and another one for money that you want to withdraw for whatever purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And currently the county is our banker for the land acquisition, everyday expense stuff. But yeah, there might be better options than that too, now that you're saying it. So now we get into the budget. As you can see, and I discussed the 15-16 stuff with you, but you can sort of see it in very real terms there. 15 million versus just under 4. And if you look at 16-17, a lot of that is carryover from 15-16. And I can go over these numbers with you if you like, and you can see in the pie chart below where the revenues are coming from. So those San Jose projects and the water district and a lot of those that haven't happened this year, we're told they will happen next year. But I think after this year, we're going to see a drop-off. You're not going to see these kind of numbers again. You're going to, the estimated actual, I think, is what you're going to be seeing in the future. Okay. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. Now there could be some big public works project that comes along and blows that theory out of the water, and we get $5 million in fees from one big public works project or one big development project. But I think this is what we're going to be our normal revenue stream. exactly, exactly. No, we won't. And the grants there represent what we hope is a $2 million Section 6 grant, a $1 to $2 million grant from Wildlife Conservation Board, which is a state organization affiliated with the Fish and Wildlife, California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Water District has a grant program through their One Water, Clean Water Fund, and they'd earmarked $8 million for HCP implementation. And we're hoping to get 3 to 5 from that. And then we've had conversations with the Bureau of Reclamation through their Central Valley project. Part of 1 million of the monies for Coyote Ridge came from that pot. So that's what the 8 million represents. So these are real discussions with real people, with real programs. Whether we get it or not, we're cautiously optimistic that we'll get a number somewhere around that. And if you combine that with coordination with PG&E, then it's not money that we can say is our money, but it helps us with acquiring land.
Have you heard from the high-speed train since they changed
Yes,
their route?
I'm going to talk. That's an excellent question, Kyle. We met with them yesterday. I'm going to talk to you guys about it in the EO report a little bit. Yeah. And these are our appropriations. And you can see it's a big jump from last year. And the main reason is we're starting to implement the plan. As you can see, categories 1 and 2 haven't changed very much. But if you look at category 3, conservation strategy implementation, it's gone up, nearly 5-fold, not quite, a little over 4-fold. And that's because we're starting to implement the plan. And I can get in, and if you guys have any questions on any of this, I'll be glad to discuss anything in more detail. And we think...
And I just had a
Yep.
question on the executive officer compensation.
Yes.
Does that include all the unfunded future retirement benefits? Do we have something off the record that is?
Oh, no, I'm a 401k. So I actually, what I have is benefits in lieu of I have pay in lieu of benefits. And through our payroll company, Alevity, I take part of that benefits in lieu of pay and put it towards a 401k. Yeah, so no, there's no CalPERS, nothing. All employees. Right. Yep. So it's real time.
Having read the article about city of San Mateo, who all of a sudden finds that they don't have it, they've never put it on the.
Right. It's a very fair question. It was a huge, that's why Stockton went bankrupt, so one of the reasons. So we feel this budget will help us achieve what we need to do, and we'll submit it to the governing board on June 16th. Any questions?
And more. Hearing none, thank you.
Edmund, I just had one other quick question. If you look at the estimated revenues of 19 million.
Yes.
And the total appropriations are 3.6 and 4.9.
Yes.
So the balance between the two, which would go into our endowment fund?
No, part of it would go into the endowment, yes. Let me give you that exact number.
So there's
Yeah.
there's like a $10 million difference. So
Yeah.
where does the $10 million go?
So what we're unfortunately, turn to page 4 in this booklet, and that'll show you, that'll answer the, sorry, I meant to bring that up. My mistake. So if you look at page 4, that shows you, and you look at the totals in the right. So we're going to transfer 400,000. So I'll start at the bottom. 400,000 will go to our reserve fund, rainy day fund. 8 million is going to go for land acquisitions from the general fund, and 4 million from special revenues. So we're going to allocate 12 million for land acquisitions. The endowment is just under 1.3 million will be invested in the endowment. So our ending fund balance will be 1.7 million. And we will have a budget surplus, I think it's, which is noted on page, I think it's on page 1 of 384, just roughly 385,000 will be our budget surplus. So if all goes well, most of the money will be spent on land acquisition, some of it for the reserve fund, and nearly 1.3 for the endowment.
And all this information tonight, these reports, they have been or will be emailed to us?
Yes. Yeah, I think Angie did not email this to you because she didn't get it yet.
Correct.
Yes.
Right.
But we can email this to you.
Please.
Yeah. This is something, Jill unfortunately was out sick for a couple days, and I was in New York on vacation for a few days, so we didn't get this to you as soon as we had wished. So, but this is, yeah, we can email this to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, the next item of the agenda is number 3, the review of the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan FY 13-14 and FY 14-15 annual report.
Hi, my name is Tara Donovan, and I've met many of you before. I was a consultant for ICF International for the past 8 years, and I've been working on the Habitat Plan since 2007. And so I joined the Habitat Agency in January to be full-time, to be the 3rd staff person. So I'm number 2, but I am not number 3.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. I'm originally from Chicago, and I moved out here in 2007, and I attended Northwestern University and have a degree in environmental science, and then Duke University to get a master's in environmental management. And after that, I came out here. Most of my training has been as a consultant, mostly on habitat conservation plans and natural community conservation plans. My kind of practical technical training was in the Peace Corps in Bolivia, where I worked with farmers on natural resource management, and then I also worked as a paralegal with real estate, probate, and tax law. So that's kind of the background I bring to the Habitat Agency. So this is kind of a test, because Ed went over a lot of what's in the annual report already in his report. But this annual report does cover the fiscal years 13-14 and then 15-16. The first year was a partial year, so we were allowed to do our annual report covering the first partial year and full fiscal year. All right, top 10. There will be a quiz. So during our first annual reporting period, there were 54 covered projects. We acquired 1,800 acres of land. We started planning for 2 restoration projects We initiated creation of one plant population. One change circumstance was initiated. We placed over 700 acres of land under a management agreement for the Western Burrowing Owl. There were 5 funded research projects. We obtained $7.7 million in revenue. We were awarded 3 awards, and then we submitted 1 programmatic RGP permit application, which we now hold. Okay, I need to get out my cheat sheet for this to make it really exciting for you guys. Okay, so what kind of cover projects do we have during the first annual report? Over half of them were private projects, with a third being public projects, and then 8 participating special entity projects. The impacts totaled a little over 500 acres of permanent impacts, with 85 acres of temporary impacts. We also had 150 feet of permanent impacts to streams, and then 900 feet of temporary impacts to streams. So of those permanent impacts, where were they occurring? It was in terms of what kind of land cover types were impacted. So a quarter of those were on developed land cover types, being the developed and reservoir. Half of those were agricultural, mostly row crops, and then a quarter were natural lands and aquatic resources. So across the county, there were 7 covered projects in San Jose, 10 projects in Morgan Hill, 6 projects in Gilroy, and then 6 projects in the larger county of Santa Clara, and these are all private projects. For public projects, there were 6 county parks projects, 1 county roads project, 1 VTA project, 8 water district projects in a variety of locations, and then 8 participating special entity projects that were permitted through the Habitat Agency. We've talked a lot about this already. Our one land acquisition that we've had is the Coyote Ridge acquisition with the Open Space Authority. It's 1,800 acres on Coyote Ridge. It spans 2 high-priority conservation analysis zones. It fulfills about a third of our acquisition requirements for the bay checker spot butterfly, and also for our serpentine land cover. It provides habitat for 14 of the covered species. It is home to a herd of 40 elk, also other locally important species like the American badger, and is also part of our heritage in the county as a rangeland. It will continue to be grazed as its primary management tool. Ed's already talked about this. We started planning on 2 restoration projects within Calero County Park in the Rancho San Vicente portion, both a pond project and a wetland project. Those will go to construction in 2016. So for me, the science part is the most exciting. So one of the things that's very novel about our program is not only are we protecting resources, we're also creating new populations of our plant species. Coyote ceanothus is only found in Santa Clara County and only found near Morgan Hill. And it is a bush. It has showy flowers, and you can see it here. We're required within 5 years of impacting the first plant to have initiated and have had some success creating a population, a new population of Coyote ceanothus. And the Water District had their first impact to the species during the reporting period. So they have a site that they've bought on Coyote Ridge. They gathered seeds of the plants. They raised them in a nursery. They did transplants. They were doing great, and then they all died. What happened was what we refer to as a change circumstance. So Phytophthora is a waterborne mold. It's commonly found in nursery stock. Mostly we see it here in Santa Clara County as sudden oak death, but it affects a lot of different plants. And it was not known to impact any of our covered species until now. So in response to this outbreak and the complete wiping out of our pilot project, we solarized the soil of that site. So each planting basin was covered with a white tarp to heat the soil and to kill the mold. And then instead of doing a nursery stock, they chose a site similar to this one, just upslope, because it's waterborne. You don't want to plant downslope from it. And they did direct seeding. And actually, this is the first time ever that a chaparral species has been directly seeded, and it has been successful so far. So that's very exciting. So this is our cutest covered species. The western burrowing owl. At Don Edwards National Wildlife Refuge, we are improving the management of over 700 acres. During this period, we had 3 nesting pairs and 13 chicks that were hatched. So that was very exciting for us. They do a variety of vegetation management, grazing, predator control, and then creating of new mounds for the species on the site. So Ed mentioned that we get grants from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife through the local assistance grant program. And so during the reporting period, we had 5 projects that were funded by the state. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about them. So first is the UC Santa Cruz Puma Project, in which they're tracking puma movement from the Santa Cruz Mountains to the Diablo Range. This research is led by UC Santa Cruz. Next, we have another corridor project identifying habitat corridors for wildlife to travel through Coyote Valley between the Santa Cruz Mountains and Diablo Range. This focuses on smaller mammals and how they're crossing the county, and specifically focuses on the Coyote Valley area. This is being led by the Open Space Authority with UC Berkeley and the Corridor Pathways for Wildlife. The Winter Burrowing Owl Banding Project looks at where owls spend their time. We've got a lot of owls that overwinter here, but we don't know what happens to them come the breeding season. So this project looks at if they're staying here and breeding up in northern Santa Clara County, or if they're going somewhere else. So by banding the birds, we can see where they're moving across the landscape when we're doing our own surveys. Next, a big part of our program is grazing. And so, and part of that is monitoring, is the residual dry matter sufficient or at the right level for our species that we are trying to manage for? So, UC and the Nature Conservancy developed a remote mapping tool to measure residual dry matter. And this project, called the Alternative Grassland Grazing Monitoring Methods Assessment, is kind of ground truthing that tool, seeing if it is actually accurate in doing the remote sensing of residual dry matter. The sycamore alluvial woodland is an important habitat here in the county. There's not much left of it, and we're trying to figure out why, what's affecting regeneration, what are the genetics of the trees that are here, and how is it affected by different management practices. That's it on research. We also have 3 more projects that were just funded, and we'll tell you about that another time. Okay.
Season of Game of Thrones.
Okay, revenue. Ed's talked a lot about this today. So half the funding is fee funding, half of it is non-fee funding. And our plan actually anticipates that 55% of our funding will be coming from fees and 45% will be coming from non-fee funding. During this first reporting period, we're pretty on target with that. We had $8.8 million in fee funding, and that came from our different fees, so land cover, serpentine, nitrogen deposition, burrowing owl, wetlands, the participating special entities, and that's it. So non-fee funding made up the other half of that. And a big so 8.9 million, and a big portion of that came from the land acquisition of Coyote Ridge by the Open Space Authority. This was funded nearly all by grants from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, the State Coastal Conservancy, state parks, and a variety of other sources. And so it was a big effort on their end, and we really benefited from that. And we do count that towards our non-fee funding because it does contribute to our success of our plan. And then the grants we received were just limited to those local assistance grants for research. So awards. We like to think that we're the winningest HCP out there, but we don't really know how many awards the other ones have received, but we've received 3 so far. And this is really due to the efforts of Rob Eastwood with the county. He applied for all these awards. So we received 1 from the Association of Bay Area Governments, Growing Smarter Together, the American Planning Association, California Chapter, Northern Section, Innovations in Green Community Planning, and then the Association of Environmental Professionals, Outstanding Award for Environmental Resource Document. So it just goes to show that a really large, multi-volume document is award worthy. And this is, Ed has talked about this already as well. So one of the goals of the plan is local control and increase certainty for project permitting. With the HCP, NCCP, we have our endangered species permits from both the feds and the state. Our next phase is to streamline the waters permitting. And during the reporting period, we applied for and then shortly thereafter received our U.S. Army Corps Engineers permit, which will allow streamlining for wetlands, impacts to wetlands and streams. So that makes us a one-stop shop for at least 3 permitting processes, using common fees across the 3 programs to allow for better projects on the ground. And then coming soon is the regional board permit. That's it.
Are those regional board permits, are they working together, or will we have to do this separately for the San Francisco and the...
The goal is to get both of them at the same time, and if we could get one and not the other, we would go for that, but really, we really want to get a permit for both. Do you have more on that?
Sure. So we're working with both boards, and you get a similar message from both. I think the San Francisco Regional Board is probably, how can I say this gently, more strident in their implementation of the 401 permit. But the Central Coast Board has a high bar too. So we're working with both. If we can't come to some sort of agreement with the 2 regional boards, we can go to the state board, because we are in the jurisdiction of 2 state boards, and the state board could issue the 401 certification.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, just a suggestion, maybe next time you can talk to John about fitting that into the annual agenda, doing an award off and seeing who gets what. We have public.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And just one thing to, and just to toot our horn, or at least not the agencies, but the existence of the plan, which is a tribute to the co-permittees and to everybody who put the plan together, the development community, the environmental community that all came together to make this happen. And with this plan being here, it allowed for OSA to pursue grants that they would not have necessarily been able to have access to. So, and those lags are the same way. The agency wasn't the lead on the majority of those. We're only the lead on 2 of them. But because of the existence of the NCCP portion of this plan. Those research monies came into the community. So they are real dollars coming into the community. In the case of research grants, that's keeping people employed and busy. In the case of land acquisitions, it's turning land that was a high priority for both the parks departments here and the Habitat Agency.
Thank you. And so, Ed, you're up again with the executive officer report.
Yes, and
Did you email us the last one?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did. And this time it's just really brief. I just wanted to talk about a couple key things. One is Leslie Little from the city of Morgan Hill, who's an alternate on our implementation board, offered to advertise our opening on the on the PAC to the broad public. So we did do that, and as far as I know, it's on their Facebook page. But we still are one person short from the business community, and I guess Walt or Julie or Kyle or Joseph or Richard, if you know anybody who from the business community, it could be somebody who owns a business, somebody who is a developer, just somebody who's a manufacturer of something that's related to development, like someone owns a lumber yard or whatever. But I think that getting somebody other than Richard, who we love and is doing a great job for us, but get somebody else to represent the business community. If there's anybody you know who'd like to apply, please send them our way.
Yeah, on the 13th, I'll be at the Gilroy Chamber Government Relations Committee meeting, and I will be making a pitch at that point as well.
Okay, thank you. And Kyle preempted me a little bit with the high-speed rail question. So a meeting was organized by OSA to meet with the high-speed rail authority, and we had nearly a 3-hour meeting with them yesterday. And the alignment seems to be that's going to come through our county will be coming via Merced and Fresno, through Pacheco Pass, Highway 152. They said 12 miles of that route will be through a tunnel. And then the alignment, then it will shoot over to Gilroy. And they talked about the train station in Gilroy and their preferences of it being downtown, but they're letting the environmental review kind of drive where that'll go. And then going along Monterey Road. So our biggest concern was alignment in how it would look and feel going through Coyote Valley, and how it would impact connectivity, how it would impact Fisher Creek. They were telling us that in the Central Valley section they're currently constructing, that it's having quite an impact on farmland, and it's having a big impact on Kit Fox and other, and they're working with the farm bureaus in several of the Central Valley counties to mitigate for impacts to farmland.
Yeah, sure they are.
Yeah. And so we said that's an issue here too, and they told us, well, we're all predicated on willing sellers, and so they're willing. They're willing to work with us on advanced mitigation, and I'll get into that in a second. So one of the big issues was the connectivity through Coyote Valley. So they're incorporating connectivity into into the section between Fresno and Bakersfield for some of the same species that we're concerned about here. And then they said, but Highway 99 doesn't have good wildlife passage, and nor does the UP, Union Pacific rail line. And I said, well, we have that same problem on Monterey, and I brought up, would they be interested in helping funding the construction of a land bridge? So I did bring it up.
At least you did that. Got to start
And,
somewhere.
and they didn't say no, and we said, we wouldn't expect them to
Fully funded?
fully fund it,
But where it comes out of Pacheco Pass, did they say where it's going? Because that's all wetlands and everything down there.
they didn't, we didn't get a good sense on alignment
They
there.
haven't come up with
A definite,
exactly
yeah.
where-
Fudging on that.
Yeah,
They're still
yeah,
fudging.
yeah, they're still fudging on that. I'd say the Monterey one is, the Monterey Coyote Creek one is either they're going to use the existing UP corridor, or they're going to build their own kind of elevated
Yeah, but
line.
they said that's too much
Okay,
a long time ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
but apparently they're rethinking it now. But did they talk about the possible service station either in Gilroy or Coyote Valley? Did you guys get into those
yes,
details?
it was a big issue
Yeah.
brought up by, actually, they preempted us on it, and they said they would prefer to build it in Gilroy.
Okay.
Well,
Yep.
I think they have a piece of property in Gilroy that they've been bringing
Okay.
supplies to for
Okay.
a couple of years.
Okay,
It's off of Leavesley.
okay.
It's
Oh, over
in-
there.
In the country.
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
It's an old dairy.
okay, an old
Dairy
dairy,
using, yeah.
okay.
Did they say how many trains they?
4 per hour per direction,
Oh, great.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was a lot of people that they're thinking they're gonna move somewhere, so.
That's
I'm-
great.
I hope it works, I don't know.
I don't think so.
So, I went to Yosemite with my family in February for the spring break, or the winter break, I guess you'd call it. And it's being constructed. I saw it.
Oh, and
Yeah, yeah, it's being constructed. Yeah, I saw
they're
them.
stopping
sure,
it.
sure. They're doing that first.
Right?
Initial segment.
Once they hit Bakersfield or whatever. it
Yeah, yeah. And the next section they're going to construct is through our county.
is. Yeah.
And 2018, 2019 is when they anticipate starting construction.
And it's just one tunnel?
That's all they mentioned was one, and they would start on that potentially first, doing the tunnel. Do you know where they're planning to exit from
No,
there?
because there's a tunnel for the water, so they gotta stay away from that, I would
Oh,
imagine.
right, and it's going near the reservoir, they did mention that.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't they just put a tube through the reservoir?
Yeah, yeah, they could.
Well,
Yeah.
when they had a meeting, I said they should go through Coe Park,
Okay,
and then that wouldn't really, and they couldn't handle that. I go, you could put a stop in the middle of Coe Park and it would be used, and you come down in the center of Morgan Hill.
yeah, no, they didn't talk
like
about that.
No, they don't want that.
They talked a little bit about an alignment along 101, but not, it's just an alternative. I don't think they're serious about it. So one of the big topics was advanced mitigation for them. And I think for ag land and rangeland, where they got to mitigate for just direct impacts to land, I think that that's something that would be willing sellers availability. That's probably something that they could, in theory, do relatively easy. Working with PG&E on advanced mitigation, that it's very challenging with state. The state, so the state just listed CTS. And the red-legged frog is not listed by the state. So the feds, with their critical habitat designation, and some of their other sort of ways of recognizing advanced mitigation, if it looks right and it has the potential and it is in critical habitat, it's a pretty easy sell for the feds. For the state, if you're impacting, especially if there's occupancy, but if you're impacting habitat for let's say California tiger salamander, they want you to buy land that has occupancy, that has the salamander on it. And we have proven to them some of the lands that we're proposing for PG&E that there's salamander here. We had a biologist out in the field last week, and they found lots of salamanders in 2 ponds. And the state, through the incidental take permit process, which is very different than the rules we have to abide by, makes advanced mitigation for species extraordinarily challenging. So I think until they work through that, doing a deal, land deal with them for species impacts will be very difficult. So unless they can work out some sort of process that the state is comfortable with, I don't know how they can work with somebody like us in a timely manner to close on a property deal.
Did they give any inkling why they changed direction?
No.
No.
Oh, yes, sorry. I understand the question now. Yeah, initially they did the mitigation bank approach, and then they work with, they bought the Lazy L Ranch somewhere in the
Middle of
Central
nowhere.
Valley. Yeah. And then they did their work. They gave $47 million. I think it was the Westervelt, which is mitigation. They're a timber company out of the southwest, but they're southeast, but they have a mitigation bank arm of their company. And they gave them $47 million to set up a mitigation bank for the train. And they did that because there was an immediate need to do mitigation now. They would rather work with organizations like Post and OSA and local Farm Bureau, and that's what they told us, and organizations like ours to do the work collaboratively to buy the right property and to work with locals. So they were very sincere about it. So I think there was the director of the northern region, I think that was his title, and then the director of environmental services, and that's what they both said, and they struck me as being very sincere. They also, maybe you guys know this, but they focused on the Fresno to Bakersfield stretch because of the economic development reasons. They said, I know the San Joaquin Valley is one of the poorest areas in the country. So they said if the Central Valley was a state, it would be the 12th largest state in the country and the poorest state. So part of the thinking was you do this big public works project in the Central Valley and it'll help the local economy. And it's a great place to test their trains. Long flat stretches, they can calibrate them and do what they have to do. And to the San Francisco East Bay terminal that's being built, they're going to use the existing Caltrain lines. It's going to be electrified. So it was new. A lot of it was new information for me. I haven't followed it that closely, but they're a potential partner in a big way in buying some of these large lands in the Diablo Range and in the Santa Cruz Range. The Richmond family, they're willing sellers, and the Sargent Ranch, it's primarily owned by a debt acquisition company now. They want to sell. So there are willing sellers, at least from a conservation standpoint. The ranching and the farming is a little tougher, and maybe some of the local farmers and ranchers would be interested in conservation easement selling them to somebody. I don't know, but how they mitigate farmland, I do agree with you. It's going to be a little harder to make that happen. Yep. And there's these other big state planning process is going on too, and the last one I'll talk about is called the RAMP process. I forget what that stands for. Both myself and my counterpart in East Contra Costa Conservancy are attending these meetings. So they're trying to, it's advanced mitigation also. I forget what the R stands for, but it's advanced mitigation plan, and regional advanced mitigation plan. There we go. But so it's primarily focused on transportation projects. So all the players are at the table, all the Caltrans, top Caltrans people, the Fish and Wildlife Service, all the wildlife agencies, the water boards, and they're trying to do what we're trying to do, but targeting transportation projects and then allowing these projects to do advanced mitigation for their impacts. One of the concerns both myself and Abby, who's my counterpart in Contra Costa, we have is, are they trying to go around what we're trying to do, and are they a competitor? So we're there to kind of keep an eye on them, make sure that this process will work collaboratively with us. And Santa Clara County has been chosen as a pilot for this process through the Regional Conservation Framework. Alameda County has one of these now. There's no permit associated with this stuff, and they it's tied in somewhat with the tax initiative to fund transportation projects that'll be on the ballot in November, and where they would like to use us and OSA to send, and potentially Mid-Penn, I guess, to send us monies to help mitigate for their projects. I'm not sure how this is all going to work, and that's why we're at the table. The ramp thing is I think a little scarier than this tax initiative, because we have people involved with that tax initiative that are including us in the conversations, and VTA understands that projects that are currently covered by the Habitat Plan won't pull out of the Habitat Plan and go on this parallel process, because then it would undermine our funding, because our whole funding strategy, which is tied to the money is tied to acreage and tied to management of that acreage, comes from projects that are projected to come in over a 50-year timeline. So we're keeping an eye on it. I think part of the reason why these processes are bubbling up is because it takes a long time to complete an HCP NCCP. And if you amend one of these documents, it takes a long time to go through the amendment process. If you want to add a species, if you want to add, let's say the city of Santa Clara wanted to join in, if you want to add projects, if you want to change some provisions of the plan, it could take 3 to 5 years to amend the plan. So I think these other processes are coming up because it takes a long time to complete an HCP NCCP. The advantage, the beauty of what we have is that we're not going through the problems that the high-speed rail and PG&E are going through in identifying properties to mitigate for their projects, or what Caltrans goes through. So for whatever reason, the high-speed rail decided not to do an HCP, NCCP. I don't know if they could do an NCCP, but they, because I was in Washington last year. It was the first ever national coalition meeting of HCPs, and there's multi-state HCPs, wind energy HCPs, gas pipeline HCPs. Oregon's doing one for all their transportation projects in a certain part of the state. So there are these big regional HCPs. I don't know why the high-speed rail isn't doing one. But I think the the reputation of these HCPs is they take too long to formulate. And us who have HCPs and CCPs and who are currently finishing up plans to be where we're at, we're concerned about that, that there won't be a next generation of these plans. And, because they take too darn long, and they're expensive. The beauty is once you got them, they do work. They don't work perfectly. Richard may have paid fees on a project he shouldn't have, but they do, generally speaking, work. And that's all I want to talk to you about.
Thank you. Is there anything that any of the board members would like to have on a future agenda? Hearing none, we can adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.